Commander Velthor's clawed fingers trembled as he read the mission briefing for the third time. The holographic display showed the fortress of Kethmorin rotating slowly, its dark spires reaching into space like the fingers of death itself. For 37 years, the Void Cult had turned this moon into an impenetrable stronghold. Every assault had failed. Every strike team had been destroyed. Now Command wanted him to lead a suicide mission with the strangest collection of warriors the galaxy had ever seen. The hangar bay doors hissed open with a mechanical screech that sent shivers down Velthor's spine. The first to emerge were the Krillians, and their very presence made the air thick with the smell of violence. These weren't soldiers. They were living weapons forged in the volcanic pits of Krillos. Prime Krelzak led his pack with the confidence of a creature that had never known defeat. Standing 9 feet tall, his obsidian-black exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights. His claws, each one the length of a combat knife, scraped against the metal deck plates as he walked. Behind him came 5 more of his kind, their predatory eyes scanning the hangar for threats that didn't exist. "Where is the enemy?" Krelzak growled, his voice like grinding stone. "I smell fear, but no blood." The Nexari arrived next, flowing through the entrance like liquid shadow. Zethara's serpentine form coiled and uncoiled as she moved, her forearms ending in razor-sharp talons. The acid sacs at her throat pulsed with barely contained venom. Her team moved in perfect synchronization. Their bodies adapted for stealth and assassination over millions of years of evolution. "The scent of weakness fills this place," Zethara hissed, her forked tongue tasting the air. "Perhaps we should cleanse it." The hangar shook as the Vekmor siegebreakers entered. These crystalline giants stood 12 feet tall, their bodies composed of living mineral that could withstand plasma fire and explosions. Gorthamar, their leader, resonated at a frequency that made Velthar's teeth ache. The crystal formations on his shoulders pulsed with internal light as he surveyed the space. "This structure is weak." Gorthamar's voice boomed like distant thunder, could collapse it with a thought. Velthar watched these legendary warriors with a mixture of awe and terror. Each species represented the pinnacle of their evolutionary path. The Krillians were pure aggression made flesh. The Nexari were death incarnate. The Nekmar were living siege engines. Together, they should have been unstoppable. Then the humans walked in. The contrast was so jarring that Velthor actually blinked twice to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Where the other species towered and dominated, the humans seemed almost fragile. Their leader, Captain Lee Hanzal, stood barely 6 feet tall, with unremarkable brown hair and calm dark eyes. His uniform was standard military issue, clean but showing signs of wear. "Ass! That's our backup?" Krelzak's laughter was like breaking glass. "Those soft skins won't last 5 minutes in real combat." Lieutenant Park Daeun, Hansol's second-in-command, carried a simple plasma rifle that looked like a toy compared to the natural weapons surrounding them. Behind her came 6 more humans, each one looking distinctly ordinary next to the alien warriors. Zethara slithered closer to the human group, her acid sacs glowing with amusement. "I could dissolve them all before they could draw their weapons." "Please, don't," Hansal said simply. "We're on the same side." The alien warriors exchanged glances. Was this human actually trying to give them orders? Velthar cleared his throat and activated the tactical display.
"Oh.
Welcome to Strike Team Alpha. Our target is the Void Cult fortress that has resisted conquest for 37 years. Intelligence suggests they have approximately 10,000 defenders. Automated defense systems, and we don't need intelligence," Zethara interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "We are the weapon. Point us at the enemy and watch them die." Gorthamar's crystal body pulsed with agreement. "Our strength is absolute. These ... humans should remain on the ship, where they will be safe." Hansal stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "We understand your capabilities are impressive. We're here to help however we can." Krelzak snorted help. "You can help by staying out of our way." The other species barely acknowledged the humans' presence after that. They began discussing assault strategies among themselves, their voices rising as each group argued for their preferred approach. The Krillians wanted a direct frontal assault. The Nexari preferred infiltration and assassination. The Dekmer advocated for siege warfare. Velthar watched Captain Hansel during this heated debate. The human leader didn't interrupt or try to force his way into the conversation. Instead, he quietly observed each species, taking notes on a simple datapad. When Lieutenant Park Dayun whispered something to him, he nodded thoughtfully. "They're not listening to us," she said quietly. "That's okay," Hansel replied. "We'll listen to them." As the alien warriors continued their arguments, Velthar couldn't help but wonder if Command had made a terrible mistake. The humans seemed so out of place among these legendary killers. What could they possibly contribute to a mission that would determine the fate of the galaxy? The crimson sun of Kethmoran's solar system was just breaking the horizon when the assault began. Gripped the command console of his battleship as hundreds of drop pods launched from the fleet above. Each pod contained death in a different form. And today the galaxy would witness what happened when the universe's most dangerous predators worked together. The fortress below looked like a giant metal spider stretched across the moon's surface. Its legs were massive defense towers that could punch holes through battleships. Its body was a maze of corridors and chambers where the Void Cult had prepared for this moment for decades. Energy shields shimmered around the structure like a protective cocoon. "First wave launching now," reported the tactical officer, his voice tight with nervous energy. Veltor watched the display as the Krillian assault pods struck the fortress's outer perimeter. The pods didn't land softly. They crashed through the shields like meteors, sending shockwaves through the enemy defenses. The moment the pods cracked open, hell was unleashed. Krelzak emerged first, his obsidian claws already dripping with anticipation. His pack followed, their berserker rage transforming them into living hurricanes of destruction. The automated turrets swiveled to target them, but the Krillians moved with inhuman speed. "Watch this," Velthor whispered to his crew as Krelzak leaped 30 feet into the air, his claws extended. The turret's plasma bolts passed harmlessly through the space where he'd been standing, landed on the weapon's barrel and ripped it apart with his bare hands. Metal screamed as he tore through reinforced steel like it was paper. Behind him, his pack spread out in a coordinated frenzy. Gorthok, the youngest of the berserkers, tackled a defensive barrier head-on. His claws sparked against the reinforced metal as he carved through it like butter. The rage toxins in his bloodstream made him immune to the pain when enemy fire scorched his exoskeleton. "Magnificent," breathed the tactical officer. "I've never seen anything like it." But Velthor was already watching the second wave. The Nexari pods had landed silently in the fortress's shadow zones, invisible to most sensors. Zathara emerged. From her pod-like smoke taking shape, her serpentine body coiling around the fortress's support struts, the Void Cult defenders never saw her coming. Her acid sacs pulsed once, and a stream of molecular acid struck the blast door. The reinforced titanium began to dissolve with a hissing sound that made Velthor's skin crawl. Within seconds, there was a hole large enough for her team to slip through. "Target the infiltrators," shouted a cult commander over the radio frequencies. They were monitoring, but his words were cut short as Zithara's lieutenant, a Nexori named Silthax, materialized behind him. One precise strike from her talons, and the commander collapsed. The Nexari flowed through the fortress corridors like liquid death. They moved in perfect silence, their bodies adapted for stealth hunting. Each defender they encountered was eliminated with surgical precision, no wasted motion, no unnecessary noise. They were death incarnate, and they were beautiful in their lethal efficiency. The third wave belonged to the Vekmar. Their pods didn't crash or sneak. They simply appeared at the fortress's main gates like monuments to destruction. Gorthmer stood motionless for a moment, his crystalline body analyzing the defensive walls. Then he began to resonate. The sound was beyond hearing it, was felt in the bones and the soul. How the fortress's energy shields flickered and died as the frequency disrupted their harmonic generators. The defensive walls designed to withstand plasma bombardment began to crack. Stress fractures spread like spiderwebs through the metal. "Impossible," whispered the tactical officer. "Those walls are 3 feet thick." Gorthamer's body pulsed with internal light as he increased the frequency. The other Thickemer joined him, their combined resonance creating a symphony of destruction. The fortress's main gate simply shattered, falling inward in a cascade of broken metal and sparking electronics. And through it all, the humans hung back. Velthar found himself focusing on the human contingent with growing confusion. Captain Hansel had positioned his team at what appeared to be a safe distance from the main assault. They weren't charging into battle like the Krillians or infiltrating like the Nexari. Instead, they were setting up communication equipment and medical stations. Cowards, muttered one of Velthar's bridge crew, but Velthar wasn't so sure. He watched as Lieutenant Park Dayun coordinated with all three assault teams simultaneously, her voice calm and professional over the radio. Corporal Kim Eugene was tracking the battle's progress on multiple screens, calling out tactical information to whoever needed it. Then everything changed. A hidden plasma cannon emerged from the fortress's depths, its barrel glowing with deadly energy. The weapon swiveled toward the Krillian assault team, and Veltar realized with horror that they were about to be caught in the open. "Look out," shouted. But his warning couldn't cross the void of space. The cannon fired. A stream of superheated plasma tore through the battlefield, striking Gorthok directly in the chest. The young berserker's exoskeleton cracked like an egg, and he fell to the ground, his vital fluids pooling beneath him. Velthor expected the humans to retreat. Any sensible species would pull back when faced with such overwhelming firepower. Instead, he watched Captain Hansel grab a rifle and begin laying down covering fire with mechanical precision. "Yujin Minho, get him," Hansel barked. Corporal Kim Yujin and Private Choi Minho didn't hesitate. They sprinted across the battlefield while plasma bolts sizzled past their heads. Yujin reached Gorthak first, grabbing the massive warrior under his arms. Minho took his legs. Together they began dragging him toward the medical station. The plasma cannon swiveled toward them, charging for another shot. Hansal's rifle barked again and again, each shot precisely placed to damage the weapons. Targeting sensors. The cannon's aim wavered just enough for the rescue team to reach safety. Krelzak passed the medical station moments later, his claws still dripping with enemy blood. He glanced down at his fallen pack member with disgust. "Stupid humans," he snarled. "Gorthok is weak. Leave him to die with honor." But Lieutenant Park Dayun was already working on the warrior's wounds, her hands steady despite the chaos around. She had medical knowledge that spanned dozens of species, and she was applying it with skill that would have impressed the galaxy's best surgeons. "He'll live," she said simply. Not looking up from her work, Gorthek's predatory eyes focused on her face with confusion. In Krillian culture, the weak were left to die so the strong could survive. No one had ever saved a weak Krillian before. The concept was as alien to him as his appearance was to her. But here was this small, fragile human risking her life to save his. It didn't make sense. It went against everything he understood about survival and strength, as consciousness faded from his eyes. Gorthak found himself wondering for the first time in his life, what if everything he'd been taught about weakness was wrong? The third week of the siege brought a horror that none of the legendary warriors had expected. The fortress wasn't just defending itself, it was learning. Velthar watched from his command ship as the tide of battle shifted in ways that chilled his blood. The Void Cult's ancient fortress had been built by a civilization that understood warfare better than anyone had realized. Deep within its metal heart, quantum computers analyzed every attack, every movement, every biological signature of the alien warriors. Krelzak was the first to notice something was wrong. The Krillian pack leader had been preparing for another berserker charge when the fortress's atmospheric processors hummed to life. Invisible filters began scrubbing the air, removing the rage toxins that made his species nearly invincible in combat. What is happening? Krelzak staggered as his natural berserker state began to fade. For the first time in his life, he felt pain from his wounds. Fear crept into his mind, an emotion that rage toxins had always suppressed. His pack members were suffering the same fate. Gorthok, now recovered from his injuries, found himself actually feeling the burns on his exoskeleton. The younger berserker looked around in confusion as his enhanced healing slowed to normal rates. "The air tastes wrong," growled another Krillian named Vexther. "Something is stealing our strength." Meanwhile, Zithara was discovering her own nightmare. The fortress had deployed microscopic drones that released reactive compounds into the air. Every time she tried to use her acid, the compounds neutralized it before it could dissolve anything. Her most deadly weapon had become useless. "Impossible," she hissed, watching her acid sizzle harmlessly against a blast door. "A venom has dissolves starship holes." Her Lieutenant Silthax tried to help by combining their acid attacks, but the reactive compounds adapted in real time. The fortress was learning faster than they could change their tactics. The Vikmar faced perhaps the cruelest adaptation of all. Sonic dampeners emerged from hidden panels throughout the fortress, generating precise counterfrequencies that neutralized their resonance abilities. Gorthamar's crystalline body, which had shattered walls with ease, now barely cracked concrete. "The fortress sings back to us," Gorthamar said, his voice filled with confusion. "It knows our song and makes it silent." 3 weeks the assault teams had felt like unstoppable forces of nature. Now they were just ... ordinary, their evolutionary advantages owned. Over millions of years, they'd been negated by technology they didn't understand. The assault stalled completely. Velthar watched alien warriors who had never known defeat sitting in their camps, staring at their hands as if seeing them for the first time. Without their natural advantages, they seemed lost, unsure of how to proceed. But the humans were different. While the alien warriors struggled with their new limitations, the humans had quietly shifted into a different mode entirely. Elalthair found himself watching them with growing fascination as they adapted to the changing. Battlefield Sergeant Yoon Hai-jin had set up a mobile analysis station in an abandoned supply depot. She spent 18 hours a day studying the fortress's defensive patterns, mapping the locations of every sensor, every weapon, every adaptive system. Her screens showed complex diagrams that would have impressed military academy professors. "The adaptation cycles follow a pattern," she explained to Captain Hunsel during one of their brief meetings. "Every countermeasure has a 12-minute lag time before full deployment. We can use that window." Private Num Taho had become something unexpected, a diplomat. Velthar watched him sharing his rations with hungry Nexari scouts who had been too proud to ask for help. The young human had learned enough of their language to offer comfort and encouragement. "Your acid may be neutralized," he told Silthax, "but your stealth skills are still unmatched. We need your eyes and ears." The Nexari scout looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. "You do not fear us, small one." "I fear failure," Nam Teho replied, "not my teammates." Corporal Kim Yujin had become the unofficial medic. For all species, his aid station was always busy, treating not just battle wounds, but the psychological trauma of warriors who had never experienced vulnerability before. He worked with infinite patience, explaining each treatment and asking permission before touching alien anatomy. But it was an incident in the 4th week that truly changed everything. Zithara had been attempting a solo infiltration mission when a hidden turret caught her in its crosshairs. The plasma bolt struck her in the side, sending her crashing into a pile of debris. Green blood pooled beneath her serpentine form as she lay gasping in pain. Captain Hansal found her there, his medical kit already in hand, but Zithara's pride was stronger than her pain. "I don't need soft skin help," she hissed, her forked tongue flicking out in defiance. "Leave me to die with honor." Hansel didn't argue. He didn't lecture her about teamwork or try to convince her to accept help. He simply knelt beside her and began working on her wounds with practiced efficiency. The biostabilizer he injected would prevent her from bleeding out, while the cellular regenerator would accelerate her natural healing. "Stop," she whispered, but her voice was getting weaker. Hansal finished his work and stood up. Without a word, he walked away, leaving his medical supplies beside her in case she needed them later. Didn't wait for thanks or acknowledgement, simply did what needed to be done. Hours later, when Zithara realized the treatment had saved her life, she found Hansel in the weapons maintenance area. He was cleaning plasma rifles with the same methodical care he'd shown while treating her wounds. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hanzo looked up from his work, his eyes meeting hers without fear or judgment. "Because you're my teammate," he replied simply. The answer hit her like a physical blow. Nexari culture, strength was everything. The strong survived and the weak perished. But this human had saved her not because she was strong, but because she was part of his team. "Called you soft skin," she said, shame coloring her voice. "You were scared," Hansel replied. "We all are. But we don't have to be scared alone." As the siege entered its fourth week, something fundamental was changing among the strike team. Humans weren't trying to replace the aliens' natural advantages. They were finding new ways to use them. More importantly, they were teaching the concept of mutual dependence to species that had never needed anyone else. The fortress might have neutralized their individual strengths, but it couldn't adapt to something it had never encountered before: true teamwork. The morning of the fifth week brought with it a silence that made Velfare's blood run cold. The fortress had stopped its regular defensive patterns. No plasma, fire, no adaptive countermeasures, no mechanical hum of weapon systems. Instead, something far more sinister was taking place. Deep within the fortress's core, ancient biolabs had been working around the clock. The Void Cult scientists had spent 4 weeks analyzing tissue samples, blood traces, and atmospheric readings from the battlefield. They had mapped the genetic structure of every alien species in the strike team with terrifying precision. Now they were ready to deploy their masterpiece. The weapon wasn't a bomb or a beam, it was invisible death carried on the wind. Microscopic bioagents designed with one purpose: to turn each species' greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. The fortress's ventilation systems began pumping the deadly cocktail into the atmosphere around the battlefield. Krelzak was leading his pack in what should have been a routine patrol when the first symptoms hit. The berserker rage that had always been his greatest asset suddenly felt wrong. His rage toxins, the chemical cocktail that made Krillians nearly invincible, began attacking his own nervous system. Something is wrong," he gasped, stumbling as his legs refused to obey his commands. Behind him, Gorthok collapsed mid-stride, his obsidian claws scraping against the metal ground as convulsions racked his massive frame. The rage toxins that should have made him stronger were cooking his brain from the inside out. Pack leader Vexter tried to reach his commander, but he too was falling, his exoskeleton cracking as his own body betrayed him. The Nexari assault team was suffering an even more horrific fate. Zathera felt her acid glands beginning to rupture as the bioagent caused them to produce acid at an accelerated rate. Her own venom was dissolving her from within, eating through organs that had evolved to contain it. Silthax. She screamed as her lieutenant writhed on the ground, green blood pouring from her mouth. The elegant assassin who had moved like liquid death was now dying in agony as her own body became her enemy. The Thecamore warriors faced perhaps the cruelest fate of all. Their crystalline structures, which had withstood plasma fire and explosions, began to destabilize at the molecular level. Gorthmer watched in horror as hairline cracks appeared across his arm, spreading like a virus through his living crystal body. The song is breaking us," he whispered as his voice began to distort. The harmonic frequencies that held his body together were being disrupted by the bioagent, causing him to literally fall apart. Within minutes, the legendary warriors who had seemed unstoppable were dropping like flies across the battlefield. Velthar watched from his command ship as his greatest fighters. The monsters that had terrified the galaxy for millennia were reduced to helpless victims, and then something impossible happened. The humans, who everyone had dismissed as the weakest members of the strike team, remained standing. Captain Hansel moved across the battlefield with purpose, his team following close behind. They wore simple breathing masks and carried emergency medical supplies, but they showed no signs of the biological weapon's effects. How Krelzak gasped as Hansel caught him before he hit the ground. The proud berserker who had once mocked the humans now looked up at the human captain with confusion and growing respect. We've been developing countermeasures, Lieutenant Park Dayun explained, already administering an antidote to the fallen Krillian. Her hands were steady as she worked, injecting a cocktail of neutralizing agents that she had prepared weeks ago. But how did you know? Krelzak's voice was barely a whisper. We didn't know, Hansel replied, lifting the massive warrior with surprising strength. We just prepared for the possibility. Across the battlefield, the human team was executing a rescue operation with military precision. Corporal Kim Yujin had somehow managed to hoist Gorthaku, weighed nearly 400 pounds, onto his shoulders. The young human's face was red with exertion, but he never stopped moving toward the medical station. I've got you, big guy, Yujin panted, as he carried the semi-conscious berserker. Just hold on. Private Nam Taho had found one of the Vekmer warriors, a massive crystal being named Zethkol, who had gone blind as his optical structures cracked. The human took the alien's hand and began guiding him slowly toward safety. I can't see. Zethkol's voice was filled with panic. The light is gone. I can see for both of us, Nam Taho replied calmly. Trust me. Private Choi Minho was working on the Nexari, using specialized equipment to neutralize the acid that was destroying them from within. His movements were careful and precise. One wrong move could kill both him and the alien. He was trying to save Zethera, barely conscious, looked up at the human working over her. You prepared for our failure? She asked weakly. Hansel, who was now coordinating the entire evacuation, paused in his work. We prepared to keep you alive, he replied simply. The words hit Velthar like a physical blow as he watched the scene unfold. While the alien species had been focused on their own superiority, convinced that their natural advantages made them invincible, the humans had been quietly studying everyone's weaknesses, not to exploit them, but to protect them. Sergeant Yoon. Hyjin had spent weeks analyzing not just the fortress's defenses, but the biological vulnerabilities of her own teammates. She had run countless simulations, developed neutralizing agents, prepared contingency plans for scenarios that everyone else had dismissed as impossible. Why didn't you tell us? Gorthmer asked, as human medics worked to stabilize his crystalline structure. You wouldn't have listened, Park Dayun replied honestly. You all believed you were invincible. The rescue operation continued for hours. Every human soldier pushed themselves beyond their limits, carrying aliens twice their size to safety. They shared their limited supplies of neutralizing agents, even when it meant reducing their own protection. They worked with a coordination that came not from superior technology or evolved advantages, but from something the aliens had never truly understood: the willingness to sacrifice for others. As the last of the alien warriors was brought to safety, Velthar found himself staring at the human team with new eyes. They were exhausted, covered in alien blood, and pushed to their absolute limits, but they were still standing. The soft skins, Krelzak whispered, using the term that had once been an insult. They saved us all. They're not soft, Zethera, replied, her voice filled with wonder. They're the strongest of us all. The fortress might have neutralized the aliens' natural advantages, but it couldn't adapt to something it had never encountered before. Humans who would risk everything to save teammates who had scorned them. The monsters had fallen, but their guardians remained standing, and for the first time since the siege began, Velthar believed they might actually win. With their alien allies recovering in the medical bay, the humans faced a terrible reality. The fortress still stood, its weapons still functional, and the Void Cult still controlled the most dangerous stronghold in the galaxy. But now they had to finish the mission with just 8 human soldiers against 10,000 enemies. Captain Hansal stood at the tactical display, his face calm despite the impossible odds. Round him, his team prepared for what everyone knew might be their final battle. But there was something different about them, now a quiet confidence that Velthar had never seen before. Hyjin, what's our status on the fortress systems? Hansel asked. Sergeant Yoon Hyjin looked up from her portable computer, her fingers still dancing across the keyboard. I've been tracking their network traffic for weeks. The bioweapon deployment left a backdoor in their security protocols, I think I can get us inside their mainframe. How long do you need? Give me 30 minutes of distraction, and I can turn their own weapons against them. Velthar watched in amazement as the human team began their assault. Where the alien warriors had relied on brute force and individual superiority, the humans moved like a single organism. Every action was coordinated. Every movement had purpose. Corporal Kim Yoo-jin and Private Choi Min-ho took point, their plasma rifles working in perfect synchronization. When one reloaded, the other provided cover. Other was already moving to flank it. They advanced through the fortress's outer defenses like they could read each other's minds. Contact left. Yoo-jin called out. I see him, Min-ho replied. His shot taking down a Void Cult sniper before the enemy could fire. Behind them, Private Nam Tae-ho carried enough explosives to level a city block, but he used them with surgical precision. Each charge was placed exactly where it would do the most damage to the fortress's structure, while avoiding harm to any prisoners inside. Structural weak point identified, he reported, planting a charge on a support beam. This will collapse their main defensive corridor, without bringing down the whole section. But it was Captain Hansel who truly amazed Velthor. The human leader moved through the battlefield not with the berserker rage of the Krillians or the lethal grace of the Nexari, but with something far more dangerous tactical brilliance backed by unshakable determination. Enemy reinforcements. Approaching from the north, Lieutenant Park Da-yoon reported from her position. Yoo-jin, Min-ho, fall back to checkpoint Charlie. Ho! I need that north corridor blocked in 60 seconds. Da-yoon, cover Hai-jin while she works, Hanzal commanded. Every order was followed instantly, without question. The humans moved like water, flowing around obstacles and reforming wherever they were needed most. When the fortress's automated turrets tried to pin them down, they simply changed direction and attacked from an unexpected angle. How are they doing this? Whispered one of Velthor's bridge crew. They're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Was beginning to understand. The humans weren't trying to match the aliens' individual strengths. Instead, they were using something the other species had never truly mastered: teamwork so perfect it seemed supernatural. I'm in, Hai-jin announced. From her position near the fortress's main data terminal, uploading virus now. Their defense grid will be compromised in 3.2.1. The fortress's own weapons began turning on its defenders. Plasma cannons that had been protecting the main entrance suddenly swiveled to target Void Cult positions. The energy shields that had kept the strike team out now trapped the enemy inside their own stronghold. Beautiful work, Hai-jin, Hansel said with genuine pride. Now let's finish this. But the Void Cult had one last desperate card to play. As the human team advanced toward the fortress's core, warning klaxons began blaring throughout the structure. Self-destruct sequence activated, announced a mechanical voice. Detonation in 10 minutes. The fortress was going to destroy itself rather than surrender. The explosion would be powerful enough to crack the moon's surface and kill everyone. On it, including the recovering alien warriors in the medical bay. We need to evacuate, Park Da-yoon said, but Hansel was already shaking his head. No time to get everyone out? Someone needs to reach the core and shut down the self-destruct manually. The team exchanged glances. They all knew it was a suicide mission. The core was at the heart of the fortress, surrounded by the heaviest defenses and the most fanatical Void Cult warriors. I'll go, Nam Tae-ho said quietly. I know explosives better than anyone. Tae-ho? No, Yoo-jin started to protest. It's the only way, the young private replied. Get everyone to the evacuation point. I'll buy you the time you need. Velthar watched in stunned silence as Nam Tae-ho began his final sprint toward the fortress's core. Enemy fire converged on him from all directions, but he kept running. Plasma bolts scorched his uniform, shrapnel cut his face, but he never stopped moving. Go, he shouted over the radio as he reached the core chamber. Complete the mission. The last thing Velthor heard from Nam Tae-ho was the sound of plasma fire and the young human's voice. Steady and calm, self-destruct sequence disengaged. The fortress is yours, Captain. The fortress fell within hours, as the Void Cult survivors emerged with their hands raised in surrender. Velthor watched something that defied everything he thought he knew about victory. The humans didn't celebrate. They didn't boast about their triumph or claim glory for themselves. Instead, they immediately rushed to check on their alien teammates, their faces filled with concern for the warriors who had once scorned them. Krelzek, now recovered from the bioweapons effects, approached Captain Hansel. The proud berserker who had once mocked the humans now looked at the human. Captain, with something Velthor had never heard from a Krillian, genuine respect. "I called you weak," Krelzak said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong. We are." "Weak," Hansel replied, his eyes tired but kind. "That's why we need each other." Zithera, her acid glands now functioning normally, slithered closer to the group. "I understand now," she said slowly. "Strength isn't in your bodies." "No," Lieutenant Park Dae-Yoon agreed, kneeling beside a Vecmer warrior to check his crystalline structure, and refusing to let anyone fight alone. Gorthmer, his massive crystal body now stable, resonated with a frequency that sounded almost like music. "Even after we dismissed you." "That's what teammates do," Hansel replied simply, as the strike team prepared to return home. Velthar finally understood the truth that had been in front of him all along. The real monsters were never the ones with claws and acid and crystalline armor. The real monsters were the ones who never gave up on their brothers in arms, who would sacrifice everything to save teammates who had scorned them. Humanity's true strength wasn't physical power or evolutionary advantages. It was their ability to see potential in others, to adapt when others couldn't, and to stand firm when everyone else fell. They had taught the galaxy's most dangerous predators what it truly meant to be strong. The humans had won not by being the most powerful, but by being the most human. And in doing so, they had made everyone around them stronger too. The war was over. The fortress had fallen. But the real victory was something far more valuable than military conquest. It was the knowledge that true strength came not from standing alone, but from standing together. As the fleet prepared for the journey home, Velthar looked out at the stars and smiled. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had made sure of that. The end.